I'd like to call this meeting of the Board of Supervisors together. And the first item, or only item, is to go into work session on advertising a tax rate. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Mr. Craig?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Gabriele?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
All ayes, we're in work session.
All right, just so the people in the audience know, there is no public address tonight. This is just a evening where we're going to try to set a maximum tax rate that will be advertised. And I guess we'll start with whomever wants to make a comment.
I'd start off with just reiterating what you just said. This is to set the maximum tax rate. This is the advertised tax rate. It can always be less. It just cannot be any more than what this is. And I would hope that our members of the press would make sure that's out, because I think there's been a lot of misinformation. And so I'll start things off with that.
Okay.
I have a follow-up comment. We also are doing this in a vacuum since we do not know the state and what they're going to do, which makes it very difficult for localities such as ours that are at this, this time in their budget process. So when you're looking at that and you're not knowing the full impact of what the state is going to be doing or not doing, it is more of a challenge than as you're looking at what to do.
Ms. Perkins? No. Okay. Does anybody have a figure they want to put out and start?
Well, I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
Not so much about the tax rate, but the budget. When we come back to finalize our budget, is that a more appropriate time if we have specific things that are not very costly but we want to shift around? Is that more of an appropriate time to look at it?
I think so.
Yes,
And we have some idea where
and
we're
the
going
two
to be.
things I was looking at specifically were the brain injury and then also
Right.
the New River Highland Resource Conservation and Development. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
We do have an amount of contingency built in, and if it's small items like that, we can adjust those very easily. So,
And I do want to echo what Ms. Biggs said. I do want to add those two things
Yes.
myself. Thank you.
Yeah.
But not, and I also want to be sure we have the social services covered.
yes, ma'am.
I was wondering if I could ask a question of the county administrator. And I know you spoke a little bit about this last meeting about the changes to VRS that the Assembly did, the legislature passed on the last Saturday right before they went out of session. Is there going to be any impact, and you probably mentioned that, is there going to be any impact on this, on our next fiscal year's budget? Or will that impact the budget in some substantial way the following year, or to the best of your best guess, I guess?
The best of my best guess right now is it may have a minimal impact on additional benefit costs. If the full 5% requirement stays in place effective July 1st, it's basically a wash. We would increase the salary line 5%, we would decrease the VRS contribution 5% because that would become an employee deduction, so it would just wash out. The difference is when you have those increased wages, you have an additional FICA cost and some other expenses. That will have some impact on the budget, but I can't tell you at this point how much.
Okay.
I guess we're waiting for a number now to start.
Well, in order to get things started, I don't mind speaking up and saying I would move at this point in time to advertise a 12-cent tax increase.
Okay, we've got a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion on 12 cent?
Yeah, we're in a work
Oh, yeah.
session.
You got to have.
Oh, we can't vote. Okay. Sorry.
Consensus, and then you gotta come out.
Come out of work session and then vote.
All right,
Okay.
do we have a consensus on the vote on the 12 cents?
I'd like to have a little bit more discussion if we can,
Okay.
Okay.
before we get into that. One of the things that's a great concern of mine, looking over this budget one more time and then thinking about the way that money is being allocated is another thing that was mentioned at the very end of the last meeting, as well as during the public hearing for VDOT, is that we have there's a good chance that somewhere not too far in the future we're going to have to be paying for roads, unfortunately. Hopefully not, but I'm wondering if this might be an opportune time, since we're dealing with a tax increase as it is, to talk about trying to put a little bit of money aside for that eventual contingency when that happens, so it doesn't hit us like a ton of bricks, and we're forced to deal with everything. Because I think everybody here knows that the state might mandate us to cover the cost of secondary roads, but that money's going to, even if it's there for the first year or 2 years, it's going to disappear very quickly, and it's going to be reallocated back to the state. So I'm wondering if it's worth talking about, another penny or something like that, with the express intention of putting that into capital projects, putting that aside so that we can have that for some future use.
Yeah. Anybody else have any?
Yeah, I'll say something to what Mr. Gabriele said, and that is, I don't see where that we can raise it any more than the recommended 12 cents, no matter what. Can you imagine a worse time in the history of the state of Virginia that we could have be adding money to people's tax base? That they, gas going up, everything from toilet paper to Coca-Cola. Everything you go to buy is higher. And I don't have to tell y'all that. Everybody knows that. And it's getting higher by the day. So I don't know how you just open-minded say, we're going to raise more money because we may need it in the future. We better be taken care of now. Because if we don't, the future might not be real good for this county if we get so much that people can't afford it. Not only can't afford it, can't pay it, and then you start having a bunch of houses repoed over that. And that would be the last thing that I would want. And I don't know, it just seems to me that this is not the time to raise extra money for anything when we're facing, if it was to go 12, almost doubling anything that we've ever done in the history. That's pretty doggone bad.
Absolutely, I take your point, but I think that we get trapped sometimes in thinking too short term, and then, for example, we don't pay maintenance on county structures, and then they collapse. So that it's worth, an extra, on a $100,000 house, one more penny is $10 a year. $10 a year, that's less than $1 a month. To have an extra $700,000 to devote specifically to long-term planning.
Ms. Brown?
Both of you make excellent points. And often when I look at the situation that we're in, and you look back 10, 12, 15 years, in my opinion, the short-term thinking at that particular time got us where we are today. And it's almost like we can't catch up in 1 or 2 years or 5 or 6 years. If, for an example, if the tax rate had stayed at 70 cents or 72 cents, and the growth within the county and the new construction would have been fine. But every time we would get some growth, they would roll the tax. It's almost revenue neutral. And it sort of pushed us into where we're at now. Now, if it was truly up to me, my heart would tell me, keep it where it's at 75 cents. but my head knows better. We got bills that we have to pay, we have construction costs that we got to pay for, and we got to look at after our employees since make up some state shortfalls and so forth. So just like people on homes, yes, the cost goes up. The cost of running your household has went up, yours and all the people out there. Well, the cost of county government, running county government goes up too. When your electric bill goes up, the county's electric bill goes up. When your heating cost goes up, the county's heating cost goes up. When we buy fuel for the equipment and the buses and things, it goes up too. One of the difference about colleges and communities and things, I guess when something happened at a college or university, they just tack on the tuition, just raise it on up. We have no other alternative than to increase our real estate tax some. And real estate taxes doesn't pay for everything that we do in this county. Some people make the assumption that everything we do in the county comes from real estate taxes, but that's not so. What is it, Mr. Meadows? Is it 35, 40
No, it is
cents of what we
32%.
32% of what this county operates on. When I say county, I'm talking about schools and the county here. That 32% of the real estate taxes are used to operate those areas. The rest of the money come from other places. But we have to make a decision, and we have to make a tough decision. And the decision, that when you look, I cannot support anything to advertise more than 12 cents. I have to look at the people, the diverse economically. I'm looking economically at the people in the district that I represent. You have quite a few haves, you have some in-betweens, and you have a few have-nots. And so to try to look after that district and the county too as a whole, 12 is about the best that I can do.
Any other comments? I'd like to make a couple, if I may, addressing Mr. Gabriele's comment on the penny set aside. In our budget this year, we do have $1 million set aside for capital improvements. So that's a start. It's labeled for one project, but again, that's a start, okay? We also have set aside a couple $100,000 for the anticipated increase in fuel costs. So we have those numbers in that 12 cents. And like I say, it's a start. With Mr. Brown and Mr. Tuck, I couldn't see advertising more than 12 cents. And I believe all these numbers are still based on the same figures we used comparatively with what the state was going to bring us.
The governor's proposed budget, as best we know it at this point.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if for some reason we get a few extra dollars out of there, that'll reflect. So that's really all I have. Matt?
Yep. But there's also the possibility that they could come back with less money. And to cap it, again, we're not voting on the tax rate tonight. Everybody should understand that. We're not voting, we're just talking about what we can talk about
Right.
later on. And if we're talking that we're not even going to talk about anything beyond that, then I think in some ways we're doing it a disservice. Then when the people come out on March the 29th, then they're dealing basically with basically a budget instead of the possibilities that are allowed with that extra penny or something like that. And when it comes time to vote on it on April 16th, if we decide that 12 is the way to go, or 13 or 10 or whatever, then that's a time to make that decision. But to simply say that we can't even talk about something beyond that seems a little bit premature to make that decision.
I I've been trying to go through the budget and have spent hours at this point in time going through the budget. And I felt like tonight's not the time to present my ideas, but rather to, I believe that we can do it for less than 12 cents. But at the same time, our county administrator has come to us, and this is his budget. And in my mind, this is as high as I can go, and to even advertise. I think there's been a lot of fear out there with people thinking that their taxes were going to go up 24 cents, and some of it is based on misinformation. In my discussions with the board, I've never heard somebody say, well, I'm on without being in a joking fashion, I'm going to vote for 30 or something along those lines. And so that's where I'm at, and that's why I made the motion. I think the 12 cents still gives us some room to talk about some different things. But I believe that we can do it for less than 12 cents. But that's debates for another night, I think.
Mr. Chair, I move we go out.
Well, I'd like to say something, okay? I understand both sides of this issue, and one of the points that I made at the beginning is that we really don't know yet. We're doing this in a vacuum with the state. So, if you were to ask me, could I support for advertising a penny more? Yes, I could do that. But I'm looking around the table here, and I don't see that the support for that. You have to have 4 people that would be willing to support that for that to happen, and I don't really see that. But I would like to state publicly that, yes, I could support a penny more for 2 different reasons. The first reason, the road thing was a big thing, but the other reason is it gives you a little bit in case something were to happen and we were to get less money from the state. Now, that doesn't mean, as we've stated over and over, that that's what that's what would be the final vote. But I want you to know that I could support you, Mr. Gabriele, and what you're trying to do. But looking around the table, I don't think I don't see the support for that.
I'd like to simply point out before we make a motion that 12 cents also means that school operating budget is actually down from last year slightly, that this will mean layoffs, personnel, probably on the school side. We are down 7 FTEs at the county level from last year, that if something happens in the governor's budget and they decide to not reduce the VRS contribution or perhaps increase it or something like that, then we are going to be in a heck of a lot of trouble. And I think it's, again, I will just reiterate my concern that this is premature to simply cap discussion at what we all consider to be probably a fair, well, some of us, sorry, not everyone, consider to be a fair tax rate.
Mr. Meadows, may I ask a question about your proposed budget? That it did, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it attempted to cover an estimate of what we believe the state cuts are going to be, as well as a $750,000 one-time capital funds for the schools. That would be slightly more than what the schools received last year when you combine the two of the operational budget as well as the $750,000. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay.
But again, that's one-time money that disappears next year.
Right.
It is using one-time money.
In the school's budget, that their request, in their operational budget, they do request $350,000 for new buses. And that's part of their operational budget as I saw it when I went through their budget. And I'm not an accountant, but that's what I saw when I went through their budget recently. And I just wanted to point that out.
Okay.
Move we go out.
Got a motion to go out. Do I have a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Todd?
Aye.
Mr. Gabriele?
Aye.
Mr. Craig?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
All rise for our work session.
Okay, now we're at a work session, and
I'd like to
You
make a
already have a
motion.
motion in the chair in a second.
No, that was made a work
we
session.
can do it
We
in a
can't
work
do that.
session.
I'd like to make a motion to advertise a tax rate of 13 cents.
I'll second it.
Okay, been moved and seconded. Any discussion on, how much was it, 15?
13.
13.
13.
13.
13.
13, okay.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Craig?
No.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
No.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
No.
Mr. Gabriel?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
No.
We have 4 noes and 3 ayes. Motion fails.
Oh, I need to say something before I forget. I can vote on the tax rate and the budget. I am a Montgomery County School Board employee, but their budget, the school board is in charge of how they handle their budget, and I'm one of many employees.
All right, 13 has been no. Mr. Tuck,
I would move that we adopt 12.
Second.
got a motion and a second? Roll call, please.
Okay, Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Gabriel?
No.
Mr. Craig?
No.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
We have 5 ayes and 2 noes. Motion passes.
If there's no other business to
Well,
discuss?
what that'll do is it advertise at a maximum of 12 cents, and the budget is 162.6, is that right?
1625590.
I was close, yes.
May I?
Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
May I ask a question,
Yeah,
Mr. Britton? If you wanted to go, you know, if things should work, that you wanted to go above the 12 cents, there is a way to do it, is it not? Would you have to start all over again? You just have to re-advertise and go through the process that we've been through.
Yeah, if the
Not the whole process, but the re-advertising. So there is a way to go beyond just the 12 cents, but right now we're advertising 12 cents as a maximum for this discussion.
But you would have to have 2 of the people that voted for the 12 cents to bring that back
Yeah,
up.
you'd have to have somebody, I'm not sure, Marty would, is that the way it would work?
No, the way it would work is the board would have to approve a resolution advertising whatever that new rate is. So you need 4 votes.
So anybody can bring it,
Correct. Yeah, it's just a new action.
if we want to go above it, right? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and she brings up a good point. When you advertise it, let's say we already had the public hearing, if you wanted to do, you'd have to have another.
Start the whole process.
Yeah, like if you had a disaster from the state and you had to actually, you know, do something more,
a
you
bigger
have to start
disaster from
over.
the state.
Yeah, a bigger
I mean,
disaster.
if the 12 cents failed, if the 12 cents fails in the long run, and somebody wanted to go back and make it 13, 15, or whatever it is, it could be done. It would just mean we'd have to re-advertise and have the discussion again. Is that correct? Okay. I just want to be sure, because I know that before we had discussed that, and according to Robert's rules, you can do that.
It's a whole other action.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
No, the last thing we voted on, it had to be 2 of the people that
No, that's
had
just a...
voted for an action to.
And I think what you're talking about is the board makes the determination, you want to change that determination. But what we're talking about here is totally different. You'd be advertising a whole other rate, and that's a whole different action. This board can't be bound by that type of thing, because what happens if there is a dire need, you have to advertise a higher rate.
Well, you have the opportunity to bring it back up and go up 1 penny, if you so desired.
It would just
after this was passed. I mean, you don't have to go back and.
Yeah, you do.
It just resets the
Yeah,
whole
you go
process.
6 months down the road and then still go back and pick up something if you have a dire emergency.
May I ask a question? When are we supposed to pass our budget? What is the statutory deadline?
Would July
July
1?
1, we have to have a budget. So, and we, by statute, have to have a balanced budget, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. I
Yeah.
just,
The problem, timing-wise, with getting the tickets out.
Yeah, because we issue tax tickets in June, that's why we start our process somewhat earlier than some of the others, because we do the twice-a-year billing.
Now, you can extend it.
Right.
by taking that.
Would it take an action of the state legislature?
Actually,
No, by the board.
the board can extend that time and give the taxpayers additional time. We've done it once before.
About 3 years ago.
with the state.
It wasn't this board changing its mind.
The reason I'm asking it is, like I said, I'm new on the board, and I believe in asking questions, but I want to make sure, so if something dramatic did happen, let's say that the legislature can't agree on a budget, so we don't ever know how much money we're getting at that point in time, we could come back into session, and we would have to go through the advertisement. It would push back the tax increase by weeks.
But the board has control of setting all the steps in that process, so.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Thank you
and
for clarifying that.
one of the other options we have is changing it prior to the December 5th tax tickets. If something would happen between now and July, and then we could have an increase in December if necessary.
No.
We've done
No,
it. We've talked about that before.
I think once you enter into a fiscal year with an adopted budget, you can adjust your budget, but you can't increase the tax rate once the fiscal year started. I'm nearly positive that's right.
I thought we talked about that once before, a couple of years ago,
Now,
when the state was pushing us.
you can always, you do have, you can't change the tax rate once you're in the fiscal year. I think you're right.
Okay.
I mean, you can check on that.
Yeah, please do, because I recall that discussion once
Since
before.
Once the landlord's put in place. and then-
Okay.
What made me just think of that is not knowing what the state's going to do and not knowing, exactly where we are. There are possibilities all the way around of upping or downing or whatever we need to do. And all we would have to do between now and July 1 would be to re-advertise and determine what the rate might be.
How many weeks in advance do we have to advertise the public hearing? Is it 2 weeks?
7 days. I was thinking 10 working days, seven days.
7 days. So we do have a fair amount of flexibility before July.
Yes.
Right.
But once July,
We
But the
do,
tax tickets go out on 2
Right.
weeks prior to June 5th. They have to be in their hands 2 weeks prior to June 5th, right?
Right, and there's one other time frame that's statutory is the school board's budget.
Yeah.
This
Okay.
board has to notify them by May 1st, or when the state gets their budget done, whichever is later. So if the state goes past the May 1st deadline, then your deadline pushes
shifts.
to let them know how much money they're going to have. I think that has everything to do with contracts.
Right, that impacts the contracts that are issued in a timely way.
You're going to tell them how much they're going to get.
Right.
okay.
Would we do like the federal government does and operate, let's say we didn't have a state budget, would we just operate on the same amount of money we had last year? Is that what we do?
I don't know, that's a good question.
I'd like to know that one too. Just if you don't get a budget on the state
I think
level.
you can, can't you adopt
See,
a
it's
continuing
very-
budget?
It is complicated. Right now, we have 12 cents, obviously, and that's what we're going out with. That's what we're going to advertise, and we won't go above that. But we can go below it. But if something goes awry, and not knowing all of the parts of it, it behooves us to know what our alternatives are in that instance. That's all. I'd just like to know. Thank you.
Is there any update from Richmond? I haven't seen one. Okay.
No, they are meeting, they're going back into session Wednesday, I believe. And some of the leadership say they are hopeful they'll work things out, but I haven't seen anything, so we'll keep you updated on
I
that.
spoke with Nick Rush, and he kept telling me, don't worry, it's going to be okay. And I said, that's easy for him
Well,
to
the
say.
House side hadn't been the problem, it's the other side, it's the other chamber that's the
Yeah.
problem.
So, but he is hopeful that our budget will be much better than what the governor initially proposed.
Let's hope so.
Okay. Anything else?
I was looking back through the budget. I think that I heard someone say we're just about doubling whatever we advertising from whatever we've done before, but I think it was 02 or 04 or somewhere around like that. the board did raise taxes 8 cents at one time, so, and when you look from 8 cents, huh?
That was 7
I
cents.
think it was 7 too.
Was it advertised at 8?
It went from 63 to 70, or 65 to 72.
It's on page 49 of the budget. I
Is it
remember.
49?
Yeah.
Let me see what it is. I'm gonna be halfway through.
That's what I remember, but my memory is not what it used to be.
Yeah, mine too.
I didn't need, that's what I'm looking through the
It
book.
went up 8 cents in
What year was that?
2009, for fiscal year 2009, from 63 to 71.
And that was
It
for the
says it dropped
77
11
million.
cents the year before.
Yeah, it went up 8 cents, right?
Correct.
So the highest that we know of was 8 cents at one time. So it's just 4 pennies what we advertise, and it's higher than what we've done maxed. So, or what the board's done maxed, not me.
And that was to cover the debt that was issued for the elementary schools and the courthouse and several other projects.
Of course, in the year 2000, it dropped 13 cents, and then in the year 2004, it dropped 18 cents.
And that's because of the revaluations. Right, the
Yeah, that was the,
revaluations.
It's just a seesaw.
Yeah, I mean, Bill made a good point because, that's what's happened over time. And there's been a few times where we've tried to discuss, not dropping it as much as it's been dropped, because then you can actually do some planning. There was not enough support on the board to do that. But it's been suggested before. It's just that.
and some of those years, we had an average increase of properties over 4 years of 32 and 34%. So when you look at a 4-year picture and you've raised it a little bit all along, you have to go back to 0 plus a penny.
Well, you can do that. You don't have to. You can do that. You don't have to.
You have to have a starting point.
Yeah, you have to project what your revenue neutral rate would be, and then
Right.
you can go from
Plus a
there.
penny.
And then
You get
you
a
go
penny
from
for the
there.
assessment.
1%. 1%.
1%.
1%, I'm sorry. 1% for the assessment.
But I think what's happened now is, because of the things that have happened, I think people are much more aware that, along with budgeting should go planning. And that doesn't just mean from year to year or assessment to assessment. That should be an ongoing project. And I guess I know I'm speaking to the choir. I mean, I've been bringing this up ever since I was on the board, but it needs to be a planning process. It's not just, like, okay, well, what do we do? Here's, each year. It needs to be looking out there. And I think a lot of our speakers have spoken to the issue of the maintenance and the capital needs and how those need to be planned for. And those are definitely expenses that need to be looked at. But along with that, you have to look at your operating budget and how that's going to happen. And I just think maybe when the roof fell in, literally was a wake-up call to really consider seriously where we're going and how we're going to get there. Instead of just each year going, well, how low can we make it, or what can we do, or, I think we sort of all are aware we need to really be looking at what we need to be doing. And then Richmond keeps waking us up with everything they're added to the plate, and if roads are added, then that's going to be a massive wake-up call. So, yes, I think we're all sort of there now.
Mr. Brown?
One quick point. What Mary was saying is so true, but over the years, the hole has gotten so deep that it will take a number of years to
Dig out.
and begin to move forward.
And as we're digging out, we keep slipping back, if you know what I mean.
All right, if there's no other business, I have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair.
Second? Roll call, please.
Mr. Gabriele?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins? Mr. Gray?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
All ayes, we adjourn.
Thank everybody for coming.
See you Monday night.